portico with 2 pillars too many. The Edwardians thought the task of education deserved a statement of grandeur. Some of us dealt with these pretensions briskly. On Friday nights, the kids used to break in and gather under the portico in the dark. Every Monday morning, the caretaker would have to scrub the new felt-tip obscenities off the wall, would have to shovel up the day-old mounds of human shit left in corners, cursing the filth that had done this. It was done by a tough girl called Beverly. You didn't call her Bev unless you were prepared to prove yourself as tough as her. Bev could shit on cue. She was quite well known for her party trick. One of the elements of the school's superficial substance, along with the orienteering club, Latin, calling homework prep, and the indulged paedophilia in the master's common room, was the occasional presence of the armed forces. I don't understand now what the connection between our education and the military was, but twice a year or so an officer from the army or the navy would turn up to talk about duty and discipline and the opportunities awaiting anyone who went in for a career holding, or more likely counting, guns. They came with recruiting films suggesting that much of your duty in the army would be spent on tropical beaches, lounging beneath palm trees. In recent years, I often thought of those recruiting films when the news came back from Iraq or Afghanistan. I imagined boys who had died where politicians had decided they would die. I think that now largely because of Percy Ogden. The only kids who went into the army were the poor sods in the remedial classes. I don't suppose they're all dead, of course. I spoke to one of these visiting officers only once. At 16, I was obsessed with the poetry of the Sitwells and of Mallarmé. I once spent an entire week with my face wrapped in a gauze scarf, the better to appreciate the world's colours. I had been reading Baudelaire, I expect. The armed forces would bring one major piece of kit to the school, where it sat with morose insistence in the playground. That day, the army brought a tank. The officer stood aside with the headmaster. He smiled as the boys clambered over it. I was a boy who had no intention of clambering. I had a horror of motor oil. I found myself next to the major. He looked at me expectantly. I had no idea what to say. My father's injunction always to make an effort in conversation rose up in me. I found a question to ask. "Do you," I said, "paint it that lovely shade of dull green yourselves, or does the manufacturer deliver it up like that?" He was immensely disappointed. I had looked keen as mustard, but my aestheticism was of the sort that emerges in cropped hair and parodically precise, even exquisite adherence to the structures of school uniform. "They do it," he said eventually. The headmaster rocked back and forth on the balls of his feet, his avuncular smile tested for the moment. "You stupid boy," he said the next day, passing me in the corridor. Stupidity was the worst they expected, not open revolt and insult. After the presentation of the tank, we were summoned into the assembly hall, a space with a glistening orange parquet floor, smelling strongly of shepherd's pie from the school kitchens next door, and overlapping that, an inexplicable odour of wet nappies from the huge blackout curtains. The film was shown. The major had the spirit to mutter and grumble at its minor inaccuracies. We listened in silence. At the end, 6 favourites of the headmaster had been primed with questions. What sports could you play in your spare time? What were the opportunities to do an engineering qualification? When did the regiment's uniform start to include... I forget what the uniform included, but could it have been buttresses? And, an indulgently drafted one, did the regiment have a mascot, and if so, what was it? A goat. The headmaster had had experience. He hardly expected an assembly of pubescents to raise a question without being primed. The 6 questions came to an end. He was about to call the event to a successfully controlled close.